Baby Robot Game's debut title really came out swinging, and it's one I truly enjoyed. Ereban Shadow Legacy is a great replayable stealth game with a cool stylized aesthetic in a dark sci-fi setting I can comfortably recommend if you enjoy stealth of both the non-lethal and lethal variety. Although it's a little on the easy side if you're a passionate stealth fanatic, that also makes it a great introduction to the genre for anyone, and a comfy game to play in general if you've just been missing fun games that force you to stay undetected lately. While the tools and abilities the player gets access to aren't anything new, and you've likely seen them before, the game's signature mechanic, Shadow Merge, feels very unique and innovative in the stealth space, taking inspiration from Splatoon and Aragami alike. Ereban features no combat of any kind, so unless you're quick on the draw with an item or skill, you'd better have a safe and fast way to escape when you're being chased, usually by climbing to high ground. Otherwise, being detected usually means you're about to lose and reload a checkpoint. This isn't the kind of game you play if you want to put together crazy combos or area wipes. It's a bit too simple for that, although you can still do a bit of it if you really try. Where Ereban really shines and is at its best though, is in its level design, with each mission feeling distinct from the rest, and in its guard layouts, which all feel really rewarding to move through and sneak around. My first non-lethal playthrough took me about 12 hours, and I played for another 12 after, doing a second run using the opposite playstyle, as well as replaying missions from the chapter select menu to test out what my unlocked skills and gadgets feel like on earlier parts of the game. If you're someone who enjoys replaying individual missions or speedrunning a game, you'll like Ereban even more than the average player. Our player character is Ayana. She is Ereban, a species which apart from her has vanished from the universe. Ereban are a race attuned to the shadows, meaning they can wield, merge with, and control them. As the sole member of her species, she grew up on the streets and is thus very adaptable, which you get to feel and hear for yourself as her journey unfolds. She's typically calm and analytical, and she's always thinking on her feet, which makes her fun to play as in the game's tense situations. Even when danger is all around her, she stays steady and thoughtful, which helps you feel like a cunning, shadowy being yourself. I hope whoever voiced her gets more opportunities, because Ayana was always cool to listen to, and I really enjoyed listening to her throughout the story. The Ereban all seem to disappear when Helios, a megacorporation dealing in energy solutions, harness the power of the sun in their system, Kepri. Because of this, Ayana is the only Ereban known of, and Helios are well aware that she is one, especially considering she basically applies for a job at the company, which is the premise of the tutorial and prologue. As an energy company, Helios saved the system from crisis, and while the giant ring structure they put around the sun is presented as a cause for celebration, the vanishing of the Ereban race makes it suspect, and if you've seen any dark sci-fi stories before, you can already tell that something is going on here and not everything is as it seems. As you might imagine, it doesn't take long for things to get crazy, and for Ayana to end up helping out a resistance movement uncovering the truth behind the corporation. Sadly, the story doesn't turn out as fulfilling as I hoped, and I didn't find some answers to the mysteries the game presents that satisfying. Still, the enjoyable voice acting, interesting locations, and dark atmosphere was more than enough for me to love being in this universe and breathing it all in as I skulked through its many restricted areas. Voice acting across the game ranges from great to okay, though you will notice a few voices get reused for different characters, which I totally understand and expect from an ambitious but still indie stealth game. Depending on how bloodthirsty you are, it does affect how a certain character reacts to you and the kind of ending you can get, which is another fun reason to replay the game so you can see a different outcome. So how does Ereban actually play? Well, pretty smooth in my experience. I played a non-lethal playthrough on controller and a lethal playthrough on keyboard after, and both of them felt really good. Movement feels great most of the time. Ayana's animation, speed, and responsiveness are all what I want in a character moving through this kind of game world. Controlling her doesn't feel irritating or get in the way of your flow through a space, and the distances of her kit all generally feel intuitive. Jumping, shadow merge, your amount of merge stamina, this kind of polish and tuning is hard to get right, let alone for an indie game. You'll appreciate that Ereban isn't frustrating to control. It starts out feeling good, and letting you play smoothly as soon as you get your hands on it, and it only gets even better from there, as you learn to read spaces and take bigger risks with your stamina. Your three speeds are crouching, jogging, and running, and they all make about the level of noise you would expect, with a certain non-lethal skill you can get very early on, eliminating most of the noise you make with movement if you want to play super fast and sprint around everywhere. On top of those, you also have your shadow merge, which moves just a bit slower than running as long as you're wading through a shadow. Some linear platforming sections feel like something straight out of a Prince of Persia game, since Shadow Merge when used on vertical surfaces is functionally a wall run that you can do either upwards or sideways, moving up or along a wall with a Shadow Merge, then ejecting to a nearby platform always feels cool. Throughout the entire game, I found myself enjoying reading the environments more and more because of the way your understanding unlocks the level of freedom you have to get through spaces. What I really mean is learning to spot available shadows. Seeing the shadows being cast by objects is something you'll noticeably feel yourself getting better and faster at, and the path the devs seem to suggest you take isn't always the one you actually have to use in many cases. That's also part of what makes replaying Ereban so fun for me. On each playthrough, and each time I replayed a mission, I found at least one new path I hadn't noticed before, and I love that. That's the kind of thing that helps a stealth game go from good to great in my mind. Another nice thing about melting into the shadows is that as long as you don't move into a light source, you're completely invisible to all enemies until you emerge again or run out of stamina. There's still skill involved in avoiding their gaze, which creates puddles of light wherever they're looking, but this means you get to play some sections really fast, letting you quickly react to a bad situation to save yourself before things get even worse. And depending on how aggressive you are, things can definitely get worse at times. Let's talk some more about stealth, the main reason we'd want to play this game. Stealth in Ereban is fun, fast, and fluid, but try striking a balance between that and exerting decent tension. Despite the speed and freedom Ayana has to move through areas and how easy it is for her to reach high ground, this game does a bit of the Assassin's Creed and Dishonored thing where, although climbing high is easy and powerful, a lot of your important objectives actually force you to come back down, and risk moving through guarded space. This means you get the pleasure of spotting and accessing safe ways to get close to objectives, but also the thrill and suspense of getting past enemies in close quarter stealth when it comes time to reach those goals proper. One aspect contributing to that is that takedowns aren't really incentivized for the most part. There are a lot of enemies per level, their patrol paths often intersect if they're in the same area, you cannot move or hide bodies unless you get an optional skill from the lethal tree, and it's punishing for a corpse to be discovered if you're still in that area unless you can get off the ground really quickly. Most times it's actually safer to ignore guards and slip past them unnoticed, since that means you're not causing any disruptions and the guard matrix stays predictable. Ereban has no leveling system. The way you acquire skill points is purely from finding them around the world or playing the main story. That means assassinations on guards don't give XP or any kind of long-term reward, so there's no material reason to go around killing everyone. The most you would ever get from a kill is a bit of resources that help you recharge your tools or abilities, but whether one drops those isn't even guaranteed, which means most kills you make will actually give you nothing. There's no knockout or pacifist takedown. You either murder an enemy or use a tool or skill to stun them for a few seconds so you can run past, or just move past them without engaging whatsoever. All of this means the only reason to take someone out is either for the inherent joy of it, to clear space and generate safety, or because you're doing a lethal kill-heavy run and trying to get the darkest ending on purpose, which needs you to go out of your way to extinguish most life on each map. No XP or currency being given from kills means there's no voice in the back of your head constantly weighing you down, telling you that you're falling behind if you don't kill everything you see. Ereban is about movement and stealth, and as long as Ayana stays alive and is getting closer to her objective, that's what matters most. As a player of many stealth games for a long time, but particularly those that lean toward fast-paced stealth, speed stealth, or elimination stealth, I still hold strongly in my heart that everyone should learn how to ghost, even if they don't actually do it or need it most of the time, and there's a really important reason for that. Knowing how to ghost lets you punch holes safely. When you learn ghosting, what you're learning is how to spot safe paths through a guard matrix. Then, the next time you're playing a game where you're doing a non-restricted playthrough, a playthrough where kills are allowed, you become way less tempted to wipe everything. You just remove whoever is the one guy in your way and leave the rest untouched, because it's quicker, safer, stronger, and comfier to leave most of the guard population undisturbed. This is actually a skill, and a very useful skill, a way to read spaces in stealth games and become comfortable with parsing what isn't worth attacking. I think some players don't quite have confidence in this aspect of stealth play, but Ereban is one of the games that will teach you that skill, because of the way it treats kills, how big some levels are, and how many guards are in them. The fact that you cannot brawl your way out of detection really helps. That, and you'll also appreciate the value of not sticking around. Once you're done in an area, it's best to move on as quickly as possible before the guards you leave behind notice what you've done, if you've gone ahead and removed anybody. Ereban is a tight, focused game. It gives us 8 really good replayable levels. The design of all those levels, in aesthetics, atmosphere, and geometry for the player to interact with and move through, are all pretty impressive. I brought up Dishonored earlier, and in its best moments, Ereban's levels do evoke that style of verticality, that quantity of alternate pathways, and that satisfaction of knowing you're somewhere you're not allowed to be. Every level is different or involves a unique theme, and that affects both the way it looks and sounds, as well as the shape of the gameplay there, meaning the types of challenges you have to overcome. There's one level early on that's huge and very open, with several objectives you can approach in any order from any angle. Another one is a small city area, very dense with multiple rooftops and alleyways to skulk through. A cool one I enjoyed later in the game involves a lot of climbing, being multiple floors tall and even having a big staircase with snipers and repair bots scattered up and down it, who can revive their fallen comrades. Levels each have a fair few areas to poke around in and explore. A lot of the secrets, which you'll want to look for since they're how you upgrade yourself, are pretty well hidden and tough to find, but doable enough if you do your best to explore that you'll walk away with most of them, which is enough to comfortably finish the game. On the note of the main objectives and paths, the level design works in tandem with Ayana's mechanical limitations and strengths to provide some of that tension I talked about earlier, and it does this very well. She has really good movement, but you'll rarely find ways to move over guards that are effortless or free. Here in Ereban, you always have to consider your approach and where you can go, and because the shadows in the world define how you can move and climb through everything, Ereban makes sure you pay attention to the space around you. I really like this aspect of the game, that because of the way spaces and your moveset interact with each other, every wall, every floor, and every obstacle is something that all feels meaningful, either to block your path or provide a new one. Some of the puzzles even involve moving shadows around or breaking lights so you can give yourself new ways to move that previously didn't exist at all. You'll get better at reading spaces as well, like I said. What I mentioned about how you can sometimes get a bit creative with moving through these levels brought to mind another game. At times, that other game I'd think of was, oddly, Mirror's Edge. There are decently signposted intended paths for the player to move through to reach objectives, and you can even adjust the intensity of the signposting in the world through the options menu. But if you keep an eye out, you'll be able to spot shadowed parts of the world you can use to climb or shortcut past certain terrain in unexpected ways. I'll say it again, but this skill of reading the shadows is something you really will get a lot better at as you play. I found it a bit clunky in Aragami 1, and I found it somewhat underused in Aragami 2. Whereas Ereban to me strikes the perfect middle ground, where shadows are always important and empowering, but using them isn't frustrating either. You can tell the game and dev team have great love for the Aragami series, which warms my heart since those games have a fantasy and setting I love. There's even an Aragami Easter egg in one side quest here, which was adorable.
Oh, this is very cool. I can see why the kid loves it.
Actually, Ereban clearly loves the stealth genre in general, with one lore note containing Easter eggs that reference Dishonored, Metal Gear, and even JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, because of course. Also, there's a massive Assassin's Creed reference in the first proper level. After you climb this tower, you can jump into this haystack and shadow merge with it on landing, getting you an achievement called Leap of Faith. As you can imagine, it's my favorite way to get down whenever I replay this level. That classic stealth game feeling of being cozy and safe in an area without much guard presence, then the cautious incursion into patrolled zones with your senses sharp and vigilant is strong in this game. What contributes to the sense of this feeling is that Ayana doesn't have any innate combat abilities at all. If you're detected, unless you can react quickly with an item or ability, your only option is to run away, and ideally off of the elevation that your enemy is on, because the run speed of enemies is always higher than yours. You are always vulnerable. In this sense, Ereban is a pure stealth game, since stealth is the only sustainable way to get anything done. Most of the time, if you mess it up, you're usually just dead. It's good then that detection itself is clear and readable most of the time. You can even lure enemies around by either letting them look at you for a little bit, or pressing a button to have Ayana clap her hands, similar to the whistle or wall knock from other games. Notably, Ayana does not ever get a true range takedown. An ability you get near the end comes closest, but even that skill teleports behind an enemy, which means you're next to them now, representing the same kind of risk as usual. Any means to remove enemies permanently are always putting your body in danger, either by them or others. This helps Ereban sustain its tension. It makes killing enemies the harder, riskier choice than just getting through them with minimal engagement. The modern trend of encouraging the player to kill everything with experience or money drops is one Ereban comfortably avoids, and the way it structures progression allows the devs to make the most of the cool spaces they've built for us instead. Progression and player growth in Ereban is smartly done and incentivizes exploration. You're essentially looking for two types of skill points scattered throughout the levels that help you improve your character, and both types are only ever found by poking around. There's no leveling system, no drip feed of experience, which makes finding one of these always feel significant. These two resources are shadow orbs you can use right away, and tech cards which you can bring to crafting benches. Crafting benches are also found around levels, and with the tech cards you bring them, you can make 4 different gadgets and upgrade them. The first is a pulse that lets you see enemies through walls on a cooldown and can be upgraded to find collectibles. The second is a visor that lets you look far away and see architecture and enemies without having to get close, or tag foes letting you track them. There's a stun mine that you can drop or throw which electrifies an enemy for a moment, letting you escape, sneak past, or kill them. Very good for reacting to an enemy running at you in case you're found. And of course, a lure hologram that starts as a visual distraction but can be upgraded to be an audio one as well. Shadow orbs, meanwhile, feed your actual powers, and you can use them as soon as you absorb one. New parts of your skill tree get unlocked by reaching the end of certain missions, and whenever you get one of these major upgrades, you're forced to make a choice between learning a non-lethal skill or a lethal skill. Whichever one you don't pick can be developed later, but the one you do pick gets its own branches and minor skills emerging from it for you to spend your shadow orbs on as you please. I found Shadow Blind from the first non-lethal unlock to be too valuable not to take, and when I did my lethal run, I really missed it. To me, it's the most reliable and comfortable ability in the game. I found it stronger than every gadget and every other shadow power, so if you're having trouble making your first choice, just go non-lethal. It's good even if you do enjoy killing enemies, since it lets you gap close really safely. Being able to silently blind an enemy you choose from a pretty good distance makes it particularly easy to get around snipers who might be holding a possible path through an area. I did a playthrough going full non-lethal and one going full lethal, which also changes the kind of ending you can get, and I enjoyed both sets of powers. Most of what you get is for interacting with enemies directly, though non-lethal also gives you a passive that reduces your movement noise, and lethal gives you a passive that no longer makes noise on kills. Found throughout levels and rarely on killed enemies are scrap and shadow dust. These are two materials that let you refill charges of your tools and shadow powers respectively. Using a gadget or an ability doesn't get replenished in any other way, so the game does encourage smart use of what you've got. You probably don't want to just be spamming out your skills and gadgets like you can do in some other games. There's something that's powerful, but hardly infinite, so you do have to worry about running out of them. I found the balance and tuning of how many resources we get to be pretty good. As the kind of player who does enjoy fairly free use of abilities and items, but also the kind of player who loves survival horror resource management, Ereban didn't feel stingy or unfair. It just kept me on my toes and made me be sure I actually wanted to burn a resource to get through a tougher area. Since finding materials to give yourself more ammo for tools and skills is still meaningful, the level design can dot these minor pickups around as well to give you something useful for checking out side rooms or going off the main path, even when you're not getting a major upgrade like a shadow orb or a tech card. The rest of your curiosity is often rewarded by lore notes or conversation logs on data pads. This is a very old school design philosophy for player upgrades, and it works brilliantly for a game that consists of 8 levels that it makes comfortable and fun to replay and revisit. If you missed an area or a side room in one run, maybe you'll find it next time, so it gives the process of checking out different paths and trying levels a second or third time some more value too. Speaking of the value of playing levels more than once, Ereban features pretty transparent results screens at the end of every mission. They list how long you took, the amount of sims and humans you killed, how many collectibles you found, and certain seals you managed to pick up, like Ghost, Merciful, or Ruthless. When you choose to replay a level from Chapter Select, you can reference these stats and try to do better, or pick up things you might have missed. One of the things I loved about this game that speedrunners will appreciate is that levels are way faster when you know them. One that took me 25 minutes on my first run took me only 6 minutes when I played it again. That satisfaction of getting faster because you know where objectives and enemies are is a very traditional stealth game pleasure, but because of how strong Ayana's movement is and the importance of when you decide to burn resources, it's even more pronounced in this game. The little optimizations you can make to movement, like using your shadow dashes, shadow merging with floors upon landings, you can jump off super tall things without worrying about slowing down, they all help maintain speed. Not to mention the ways you can learn to look for shadows that give you access to lines and routes you probably didn't notice your first time through. I'd be curious to see what a speedrun of this game looks like a week or two after release, since when you put all this together, it makes Ereban a speed game that's very comfortable to practice and route. Of notable interest both to players who are trying to practice specific parts of a level as well as players who are trying to record footage for cool gameplay showcases is that Ereban lets you restart both missions and checkpoints on top of already having a chapter select. Considering many games fail to provide either of these features, let alone both, I give Ereban big props and respect for its choice to include them, and I know a lot of players who follow this channel will appreciate their presence here. Ereban Shadow Legacy is out today on Steam, and I recommend it. It's a nice game I enjoyed my time with, and if you enjoy comfy, replayable, fast-paced stealth games with interesting level design, you probably will too, especially if you also love games that validate and empower a pacifist or ghost playstyle, since they can be pretty rare sometimes. Baby Robot Games self-published Ereban, which is impressive, and a very challenging thing for any indie developer to do. They've said they'd like to do console versions sometime in the future if they ever get the chance, and I really hope they do get that opportunity because a game this pleasant and playable deserves to be experienced by as many players as possible. Thank you for listening. May fog shroud you, may stars light your way, and may the night keep you safe.
What is this telling you? You clearly know what my people are capable of.
This is the standard test for all agents.
Do all your agents have shadow powers?
Attention